Welcome to CSIS Online. The way we bring you events is changing, but we'll still present live analysis and award-winning digital media from our Dracopolis Ideas Lab. All on your time, live or on demand. This is CSIS Online.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Hamre, and I welcome you to what you're going to experience as the most remarkable conversation with an individual that you can say is an authentic innovator, and an entrepreneur in the first degree. I'm privileged to know Farhad Khosravi, who is on our board at CSIS. But I got to know him before he agreed to that, and you will be amazed to learn about his life experiences, his outlook, and the way we should all together, all of us together, think about innovation in America. I'm so grateful to have Farhad join us today. I should just say a word. You know, a lot of Americans can't quite get the first name. He is a little too exotic for us Americans. So he's widely known in the business world as Fred Khosravi. I'm going to say Farhad because I want to signal my respect for him and his background. But Fred, you should take us a bit into your background. You came to this country to go to school. I doubt that you anticipated becoming a serial entrepreneur that created 25 or 26 companies, which you have. So, but let's go back and just talk about your journey, your life journey from Iran and now to your remarkable career here in the United States.
Thank you, John. First, I really want to express how grateful I am that you've actually included me in this process, in this dialogue. You know how important it is to me, and to be with you and kind of thinking through how we can kind of take impediments out of the path of innovation and really doubling down on American innovation is an absolute privilege for me, and I really do appreciate you getting me involved in this process. To have been really included from my perspective means probably more than most of the people who are actually involved in this renewing American intervention, probably largely because of my background. First, I came to the US, as you mentioned, as a 17-year-old boy, kind of wet behind the ears and no family. And effectively as a refugee, I left Tehran on one of the last Pan Am flights that flew out of Tehran into the US, into New York's JFK, actually on September 11, 1978. These were days after the Bloody Friday events in Tehran, which was really the beginning of the end of the Shah's regime. That was on September 8th. 3 days later, I was on a Pan Am flight heading to JFK all by myself. And during that time, there was quite a bit of instability that was going on in the whole region, but especially on the Western frontier. I'm Kurdish by background. I'm Kurdish Iranian and Kurdish American, so to speak. So I've also, by the way, knew what it meant to be a minority from the time I'm actually born. So for me, being a minority has not been really that dramatic of an effect moving from Iran to the US. But being Kurdish, the instability in the Western part of Iran really affected me and my family pretty significantly. So I arrived at JFK the same evening on September 11, 1978. And I distinctly remember that my immigration interview wasn't going so well. And the reason it wasn't going so well was that the immigration officer essentially got frustrated with me. And here I'm a little kid who barely speaks English. I understand English, but I actually am barely speaking it. And he was getting frustrated with me for good reason, by the way, because in the haste of issuing my passport in Tehran, they had not actually put in the American date of my birth into the passport. They only had put in the Persian one. And they were asking me, what does this date translate to? And I honestly didn't know. So for many years, until I actually got naturalized, I had the wrong birthday in my in my documents. It was quite intimidating for a 17-year-old. But the next morning, I was actually I slept in the airport in LaGuardia. Basically, took a cab from JFK to LaGuardia, slept in the airport, and then got into a flight from LaGuardia to Nashville, where I eventually drove by car to Cookeville, Tennessee, and went to school at Tennessee Tech University, the home of the Golden Eagles, so to speak, where I was really so privileged to get my, and I say this with a great affection, basically, to get my bachelor's degree and master's degree in mechanical engineering. Having had a revolution behind me and having a war, the impending war that took 1 million lives, basically, between Iran and Iraq, which I would have actually had to fight in, if you will, really made me devour the education that I was being given in Tennessee. I was absorbing it in ways that I didn't know I had that kind of a sense of absorption. And I was doing that because I felt like I owed that to the people who I've left behind. So not an insignificant part of my heart, I have to say, has been left in Cookeville. It's given me, I feel like it gave me shelter and a tremendous education. Now, was there racism that I had to confront in Tennessee, especially as somebody who was there with an Iranian passport during the hostage crisis? Of course. Was it difficult? Absolutely. But it was a safe space, nevertheless, that you could learn and you try to grow. And this was something that I felt like I really owed to the people that I left behind. So Cookeville is also where I ended up getting married to my wife, Flora, also a Tennessee Tech alumni, so to speak. And I ended up 5 years into being in Cookeville, by the way, by the time I was 24 years old, to getting cancer, which ended up getting treated at Vanderbilt University. And I went through that with my newly minted significant other, so to speak, Flora, through that experience and away from family. So I feel like together we ended up getting really chiseled in this process over the 6 to 8 years that we were in Cookeville. When I got my master's degree, finding work for somebody on a student visa was quite difficult. I mean, because you had to not only convince the employers that you were competent enough to be hired, but you also had to convince them to go through a very arduous H-1B visa process to get you status to be able to actually work. And that really just made it a double whammy that made it very difficult to get into work. So I eventually was given right to legally work through the Simpson-Mazzoli Act and President Reagan's amnesty program. And then pretty shortly thereafter, I ended up actually having 3 pretty exciting job offers in the automotive industry, in the defense industry, and this small, obscure little company in Huntington, West Virginia, which was developing pioneering technology for treatment of cataracts, making intraocular lenses. So I just picked that because I thought that was cooler than defense or automotive. It was really, I didn't even know what life sciences or medical technology was until that point. And when I actually um, started working for the company, I actually didn't know that I'm becoming involved with something that is going to change the world for so many human beings, particularly in the future. Um, when I worked there, Flora, my wife, never moved out from Atlanta with me because I was. She felt like she wanted to actually stay in Atlanta and do her work while I'm actually in West Virginia. So I commuted back and forth quite a bit to Atlanta over the weekends. And on one flight, I actually met this wonderful, charming lady. She was in her 50s, and she was excited about telling me about the fact that she had had a surgery. And as she started talking to me about the surgery, I realized that she actually had an intraocular lens placed, basically. And she was telling me with a great deal of excitement that before this procedure, she was blind and now she can see, and how exciting that is, and how exciting technology is. And to realize that this was actually the very technology that I was working on, really, for me, this is in 1988. It cinched the deal for me that that's what I want to do, really, for the rest of my life. And and that's when I realized actually what a pioneering innovation that technology was. Bottom
But
line,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Forgive me for interrupting.
just to me, it's so amazing, John, and you and I talk about this a lot, that the journey for a 17-year-old boy to go from uh, being cussed at the immigration stand in JFK, to be in a mode where you're actually working on a pioneering development of a technology that's going to heal so many people in the ensuing 20 years. It was just amazing. And I would say nowhere else in the world this is possible. I do want to quote this because I think about it all the time. President Reagan, in that speech that he delivered, that I've actually copied you on, for Secretary Schultz, he says, we may sometimes forget it, but those who become American citizens love this country even more. And I think that is really the essence of my story from my perspective.
It is such an inspiring story, and in a sense, archetypal. You know, when you look at the number of Fortune 500 companies that are led by first generation immigrants, it's breathtaking. I mean, it is really an astounding blessing. We'll make that the topic for a future conversation with you, Fred, because I think the immigration story is rich and important. But I really want to explore with you the nature of entrepreneurship. I doubt that when you were at Tennessee State, you took courses in entrepreneurship, and here you've created 25 companies, probably more than that. You know, so let me just ask: what are the what was that spark that led you to become an innovator?
That's a good question, John. I've been asked this question before, and I say that one aspect of it is naivete of not knowing what's not possible, and not being able to figure it out. But it's the courage to actually pursue possibilities in the future that really don't exist. So my experience has been that when you really look at what is really the nidus of innovation, from my perspective, I actually happen to believe that a free environment for thinking, an environment where your ability to imagine and to think about the future is only limited by you and not limited by some kind of an institution that puts those limitations on you, really has a lot to do with innovation. I think that's really one of the areas that I know you and I have talked about quite a bit in terms of making sure that we don't actually create impediments for innovation. Because I think we may have more innovative people amongst us who get intimidated by how difficult it is to be in that role, from my perspective.
We have this popular image in America of a lone solitary figure working in his or her garage, and they're tinkering away on a product, and but my suspicion is this is a lot more complicated than that. Being a lone creative intellect versus understanding the ecosystem of innovation. My sense is that it's more the latter. Would you share with us, because I know you live in Silicon Valley, you live in an ecosystem of creativity. What is that balance between insight and creativity and an ecosystem that helps support your ideas?
Well, I think one aspect of what is really critical to, I would say, life sciences innovation. This is, for better or for worse, all I've done in most of my career for the last 30 plus years. I think the key aspect of what resonates with me continuously is that life sciences innovation is so particularly indigenous to the United States. And I think medical devices, medical technologies, biotech, pharmaceuticals, if you look at everywhere in life sciences, innovations that emanate out of the US are the most sought after in the rest of the world. It has to do with standards, it has to do with regulation, with good common sense type regulation, basically. And it has to do with keeping the highest standards of public safety, basically, public health that we have in the country. To me, I think that is really, really critical to the process. But the real nidus of innovation in life sciences, at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, is not in a garage by putting a circuit board together and changing the world, basically, by making a computer, if you will. It is the real nidus of innovation in life sciences really comes from collaboration between engineers, scientists, with physicians. And if we really create a wall and over-regulate the relationship between physicians and innovators, basically, we have effectively somewhat impeded the process, because it's the physicians who know what the patients actually need. They understand the patient need more than anybody. They know what they need. They know what they don't have, but they don't know why they don't have it. And I think it's through that process of actually achieving to understand what those unmet needs are is when innovation in life sciences basically emanate. So one of the, it's really important to ensure that the relationship between the physician community and the engineering science community basically is robust as a part of this innovation regime. Obviously, it can't be cozy, and the commercial aspect of it needs to be viewed and regulated. But I think if we keep physicians away from engineers and scientists, basically in this country, and build too big of a wall between them, I think we would actually impede life sciences innovation.
Yeah, Farhad, you anticipated my next question, which is going to be about this ecosystem. And I take very, very strongly the idea that there has to be an open dynamic, between practitioners and researchers and innovators, But so let me just ask, and I know this is a very simple-minded question, but it's the dynamic between creative push and market pull. You've created 25 companies. How much of your work has been because of an insight that you received from a creative clinician or a researcher versus a clear understanding of a market failure that you could solve? Creative push, market pull. I know that's very simple-minded. I'd welcome your thoughts.
I actually, like you, John, I believe that both of those pulls are there, basically. But in my case, it's always been the nidus for these ideas of everything that I've had the privilege of being involved with, always emanates from the clinical community. The need and the gaps and what they need to be able to help more patients, save more patients, do the job better, do the job more efficiently and cost effectively, more often than not comes from the physicians. Now, when I say comes from physician, it doesn't mean that they prescriptively come back and give you a list of top 10 things that you can make for us to make our jobs easier. As an engineer, as a scientist, and this is where I'm talking about the collaboration, is really the critical part of this, basically, is that you need to go be with them in the hospitals, in the case of the existing company that I'm actually focused on, Imperative Care, to be in the cath labs, in the neurosurgery ORs, and understand the dynamic, understand the points of frustration that really happen. When a physician says, "Boy, I wish I had this," and it's not because they don't have something that it actually exists, that they don't have it on the shelf, but because it doesn't exist. It's the job of an engineer or a scientist, basically, to be able to recognize those gaps. But the real need really comes from the clinical community.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Farhad, you already touched on this, but I think the point you made earlier needs to be, drawn out and emphasized for our listeners. Your career has been in life sciences. This is a highly regulated world, and a lot of business guys and inventors kind of complain about, all the road bumps and the speed bumps, the hurdles to get over. But you framed the regulatory environment in a different way. You talked about it creating kind of a larger structure or ecosystem of trustworthiness. Would you just dig a little bit more into that for us?
Yeah, no, certainly. And I've really appreciated having this conversation with you over the years, John, because I think I really feel that regulation is what, and I may get criticized for making this statement, so you may have to believe that. Basically.
Not from me. Not from me.
But I really do think that the life sciences innovation in the United States is not what it is in the world, basically, and doesn't have the standing and the stature in the world because we're all such amazing innovators. I think regulation and standards have a lot to do with it. And I feel that um, um, in working with FDA for so many years. It's easy to get into a mode of uh, playing cat and mouse with the regulators. Basically, it's never really productive or constructive, especially with an organization like the FDA, for example, and life sciences, where I feel that the charter and the goal of um, looking after the public health of the American people is so critical to them, and such amazing scientists that actually are within the FDA. The issue is not regulation. The issue is uh, the wrong type of regulation. It's time. It's the fact that when it's when there is confusion, when the goalpost is not set up. If the goalpost is set up, even if it's way farther than where you expected them, basically, you can still underwrite an investment towards that longer term goal, basically, if you know where that is. But if the goalpost is moving by the regulators, basically, you don't know what to shoot at. The investors don't know what to shoot at. So the motivation to invest your money, your time, your energy, your focus in really bringing something to the table somewhat gets diminished. But if the timelines are well defined, if they're efficient, I think regulations and standards can only elevate, from my perspective, U.S. innovation in life sciences.
It's very interesting. Not all government regulators in other areas of the economy have deep expertise, but my sense is that in the life sciences area, the regulatory environment is guided by, thoughtful people who are kind of up to date. Is that right?
Very much so. Very much so. I don't know the security apparatus in the U.S. government, but I know the FDA relatively well as somebody who's on the other side of the table, and it is we as a country, as a nation, should be proud to have an institution like that, and with that kind of a thoughtful perspective. Whenever the FDA ends up being an impediment to the process, it's because the processes that are in place have not been clarified and they're ill-defined. Once they get basically pinned to the ground and we know what to shoot at, basically, it's really a magnificent collaborative exercise. I consider the FDA an important stakeholder in elevating U.S. innovation by setting high standards for U.S. Public health.
I'm going to pull that out and highlight it separately because it's such an important statement. Regulation isn't just about restrictions; it's about quality and creating predictability. And you've summed this up so brilliantly, Farhad. Let me ask about international markets, both from a consumer standpoint and a competitor producer standpoint. Europe has a big, sophisticated market, pretty regulated. Asia, especially China, has a less well-developed regulatory market. How do you, as someone who's inventing products, obviously you have your eye on the global picture. Would you share your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, John. Before I actually give that perspective, I think there's one perspective that I would love to share, and this, in a way that it may be a viewpoint that we don't normally hold in a consensus type thinking, basically. But first of all, just let me kind of give you my biases of how I look at innovation and how it actually factors into international spectrum. And that is, I feel that security, national security, and freedom to think, freedom of speech, are really the two most important foundations of innovation. Free thinking people and national security, where you can actually invest in the future. These opportunities that are there to innovate in life sciences, and I think we will need more of it. By the way, I think COVID and a worldwide pandemic has kind of demonstrated to us that we've kind of gotten caught flat-footed, basically, by essentially not funding our healthcare systems appropriately, not funding our systems of standards and regulations appropriately for a future where people actually can live a healthy life, if you will. I feel like that this country is so, and I'm not, by the way, being Pollyannish about it. This is really an observation of having spent a lot of time in many countries and working with a number of countries from Western Europe to Asia to South Africa and Australia and New Zealand and what have you. You can see innovation basically truly taking shape in places where you can actually invest in the future, invest in, and by national security, I don't mean guns and ships and what have you. I mean health security. I mean education security. I mean middle class security, so to speak. Creating an environment where you can believe in the future 7-10 years down the road if you're going to invest multiple hundreds of millions of dollars for each one of these innovations over a long period of time. So I think that really is pretty critical. But I think what differentiates us is the combination of the two, the combination of a free thinking people, free expression, not a system where the government comes in and picks winners and losers, basically, and the national security would be ahead of us, is really the ultimate petri dish, from my perspective, for innovation.
You know, a lot of people in Washington are kind of working themselves up into paranoia over China and what China presents as a competitor. But it doesn't sound to me like you're paranoid about China. Your reflections?
I come from the school of thought that China is a competition that we have to learn to be living with and contending with for a long time to come. And when you sit down with the Chinese people, in not just in big cities and with big investors who are throwing a lot of money around, what the Chinese people believe in terms of a vital future and a secure future is really not that different than what the Americans really believe in. It's just two different value systems in terms of how we conduct ourselves. And I really don't think those value systems are going to necessarily converge at some point in time. I think we just have to find ways to be able to work closely together, to be able to leverage the capabilities and capacities that are available in China, which I think are extraordinary, and these capabilities that we have in the United States, which are unique. I don't think for so long as China remains a system where the government picks winners and losers, basically, a lot of big numbers of investments and dollars and big projects that would essentially be initiated in China, but innovation in its truest form, in that fundamental form of it, basically, I don't think really lives in that petri dish in a meaningful way. And I think we can have, if we really double down on those fundamentals of our own petri dish for innovation, I don't think there is any country in the world that can actually compete with the U.S.
That's you've really opened up the door to my last question, which is, there's so much talk in Washington these days about stimulating innovation. Government needs to do some things. It sounds to me like you have a fresh perspective we should hear about, how does the government help you, the entrepreneur that's out creating businesses, creating jobs, creating products that save lives? What should Washington be doing now?
Well, that's a tall order question. You saved this one for last. I would say that we should look at, we should strengthen those principles of what this country is all about. Now, we got work to do on education security, on health security, on middle class security. We have work to do. I mean, those things need to be there for investors to be long-term thinking about what they invest in, what innovation, what type of innovation they invest in, whether they're long-term or short-term. But I also would think that the government can actually play a big role in ensuring that the innovations, and I live in Silicon Valley, by the way, and not everything is great here, and we get labeled as the arrogant Silicon Valley guys, basically. But honestly, when you walk around and talk to people, the amount of innovative thinking that goes on in environments like Silicon Valley that needs to be ported over to the rest of the country, basically. We need to bring it to the heartland of America. I work closely with Congressman Ro Khanna. He's really doing all the heavy lifting. That's an area of focus, and helping really bring that innovative thinking into the heartland of America is really important. Technologies and innovations that are somewhat in the earlier stages, allowing them and giving them a push through NIH, through other ways of tax credits to venture capital, basically, to bring those opportunities a little bit forward, getting them closer to a place where the later stage investors could actually come in and bet on those type of opportunities, basically. I think those are the places where the government could really make a big impact. I'm skeptical about the government stepping in and taking the ones that are in the later stages, that are close to the commercial stage, pushing them over the line, basically. I'm a lot more skeptical about that. That begins feeling a little bit more like picking winners and losers, basically, to me. But the early stage technologies were really the cornerstone of ideas and innovations, and really igniting those and fueling those fires in a more significant way, I think is probably the way to do it.
In a way, Farhad, you answered this question also in the way when you sent me the quote from Ronald Reagan, when he talked about bold men and women yearning for freedom and opportunity, leaving their homelands and starting their lives over. They give more than they receive. They labor and succeed, and they become entrepreneurs. But then, to quote President Reagan. He said, but their greatest contribution is more than economic, because they understand in a special way how glorious it is to be an American. It sounds to me like that's the secret here.
I get choked up when I read that passage, John, very, very much like you, because it is really true.
Well, Farhad, you are an authentic pioneer of innovation. You are a pathfinder for all of us. You've created companies, you've created jobs for thousands and thousands of people. You've brought products to the market that have saved lives. And now your great new adventure is to create a company that will finally deal with the great malady of strokes and the way that strokes so badly damage people's lives. And you're going to fix that. Farhad, thank you. What a remarkable story you have brought to all of us today. And, let's just a message to everybody listening in Washington. We need creative immigrants coming to America. So thank you. Thanks for doing this today.
Great. Really appreciate it.